My name is Jamie Smith. Welcome to Nurse Deck. I'll be your host today. I am the Chief Education and Compliance Officer with Premier Geriatric Solutions, and today we're excited to have Miss Linda Benton with us today. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being with us today on Nurse Deck. Can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Sure thing. So my name is Linda Benton, as Jamie just mentioned. I'm Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives at Johnson & Johnson and our Global Community Impact Group. And what that really means in the course of our conversation today is I lead what we call Johnson & Johnson Nursing, which represents our company's 125-year commitment to supporting and advocating for the nursing profession.
That's awesome. So, Linda, tell us, how did you get started in healthcare?
You know, it was a long time ago, and I won't tell you the year, but I basically joined Johnson & Johnson right out of college. I knew that healthcare was, a hugely important segment of business. I had a couple friends that were working in the healthcare industry, and I was fortunate enough to get an entry-level position with Johnson & Johnson in the pharmaceutical sector, and that's where it all started. But I had no idea at the time how big and how deep Johnson & Johnson was in terms of the work that we do collectively for healthcare, in the U.S. and around the world. But it's been a great ride. I've been here for several decades, I shall say, and it's been a wonderful company that is Credo based, and that's how I got my start.
Wow, so you've been there since day one, since you graduated.
Yep, a long time. I've seen a lot of change, but a lot of huge growth and opportunity too.
Okay. So why should all nurses and nursing students participate in nurse hackathons?
Great question. And I think the best way I would answer that, Jamie, is that because I think that healthcare and our healthcare system as we know it is an incredible need for urgent change. And from my perspective, with nurses being the largest healthcare workforce, who work in virtually every corner of every community, who've got tremendous educational backgrounds, and tremendous patient insights, because nurses are the ones that are spending the most amount of time with patients in a variety of settings. I really think that for us to really improve healthcare and transform the way our health system works, nurses have to play an instrumental role in leading that work because of the insights that they have, the work that they do, and just the bigger picture that they see. So for me, hackathons, and of course the one that Johnson & Johnson has been supporting over the last couple of years with SunCL and Microsoft, it's really about bringing together people who in many cases have never, shall we say, hacked before, to really come together, to share ideas, to brainstorm, but to do so in a safe environment where you've got coaches and mentors and provide you with a framework to help you bring your idea to life. Ultimately, at the end of the weekend, hopefully coming out of it with a really well-formed idea to continue to work on and grow and develop it.
Okay. So how can we strengthen the nursing workforce?
That's a very, very broad question, but I think there's a variety of things that we need to think about. I think first and foremost, we really need to reinvest in the nursing workforce as a whole. I think so much has happened, in healthcare, right? And the nursing workforce, as I mentioned, the largest across the U.S. is 4 million. I think there's 28 million nurses worldwide.
I didn't know.
Yeah, and our nurses are the backbone of our health systems here in the U.S. and around the world. And without nurses, our health systems wouldn't work. So I think we need to really reinvest in the nursing workforce to really understand where healthcare is today, what the nursing workforce needs, and really embrace nurses as innovative leaders who can really transform healthcare versus in some cases the way they have been viewed more as cost centers. So that's one. I have a list of about 10, so just bear with me. I also think that we need to take steps to reduce barriers to empowering nurses to deliver care. So whether that's scope of practice challenges that continue to crop up across the country, although we did see some relief from those barriers during COVID, where some of the rules were relaxed for a period of time. And also just nurses being able to work across state lines. There's just some basic things I think need to be addressed to really help strengthen the nursing workforce and enable nurses to do the work that they do so beautifully, day in and day out. I think education is another important topic in relation to strengthening the pipeline of nurse educators. As I'm sure many people know, nurse educators are obviously leading our nursing school curriculum, and a lot of them are getting to retire and age out. And in addition to that, while we have more nurse educators leaving the profession, sometimes it's a tough profession to join. as a nurse because you have to go to school to be able to be a nurse educator. And then the compensation can sometimes be challenging because it could be less than you would have made at the bedside. And, obviously education is such a critical component of where our nurses are going. So we need to invest in our nurse educators and make it, I think, more attractive for them to do the work that they do so important for students. On the flip side of that, Jamie, I would also say that we need to take a closer look at the nursing curriculum and how that's working. And I know that groups like AACN, working in partnership with so many other organizations across the country are doing that with new nursing essentials. But I think at the bottom line from the work that we have done at J&J and the people that we talk to is that we need to ensure that the nursing educational curriculum mirrors what is needed out there in the real world. So making sure that nurses are getting, competency-based, skill building curriculum built into their experiences. We need to ensure that they're able to gain clinical skills in settings outside of just acute care. Not that acute care isn't important, it's critical. But what about having people go into schools or go into homeless shelters or into the community and just learning to get those clinical experiences as well, because we need nurses in, like I said, every corner of every community. So I think that's important. I also think that it's really important that we actively value and recruit nurses and develop nurses for their leadership roles and continue to broaden their clinical skills. Again, with the impact that nurses bring in healthcare, we need to ensure that we're investing in helping nurses grow and develop their own leadership skills to be able to drive greater impact there. And then I would say, a big aspect is providing mental health support. So in terms of strengthening the nursing workforce, I think everyone knows that, it's been a tremendously stressful year and a half with COVID and the impact that has delivered to the front line, including nurses. But at the same time, I'm also concerned that some people think that when COVID eventually, eases off, that stress and strain will diminish. And it might to some degree. But from every conversation I've had with people, it seems that this mental health strain has been in place for decades for nurses, and there's some foundational challenges that need to be addressed in order to ease that. So speaking of, administrative burden, with the likes of the new systems that have come into play, whether it's Epic or others, certainly there's great things to be learned from EMR. There's also been a substantial amount of administrative burden that's been placed on nurses that honestly takes them away from patient care in many cases. Right? So we need to be monitoring that. And then I've also heard people talk about, needing or looking for, clear career paths as a nurse. So, versus in some cases today, maybe if you're a new nurse graduate, you go into work, whether it's in the hospital or in a doctor's office, wherever it is. And sometimes you may feel like that's going to be where you're going to be for the rest of your career. And maybe that's where you want to be. But I think there's a lot of people who would like to continue to grow and broaden and develop. So why can't we make sure that we're developing career paths for nurses as well, so they can continue to, again, up their value and their skill sets and bring more value to the work that they're doing. And mentoring is a key piece of that as well. I know I'm talking a lot, but this is such a meaty question for me. More flexible working models for nurses. Again, I know you think about the acute setting, you think about a 12-hour shift, and then sometimes, overtime that comes into play. Not everyone perhaps can dedicate that amount of time to doing that. So what about more flexible models, whether some of it is, supporting telehealth or remote care or what have you, where you can still bring value into healthcare through the nursing profession, but maybe not necessarily in that 12-hour window that's been so traditionally in place for many, many years. And then I guess three more. One more that I would say is making sure that we're working with nurses early in the process as companies are developing technology for healthcare. One of the things I hear about a lot when I'm talking to nurses is how, again, no matter where they're working in terms of their jobs and their roles, sometimes they're handed technology to use as part of their patient flow that makes no sense. And I think it's such a simple thing for these companies that are developing these tools that are really important tools for healthcare to make sure that one of your end users, aka a nurse, is really early in the process to understand, what is really needed, what works, what doesn't work, so that at the end of the day, when you develop a product, it's a product that actually is going to be used effectively based upon the nursing insights you tapped into when you're developing it. And then two more, and then I'll wrap up this question. So sorry.
It's
I
okay.
would say making sure that we're giving nurses the space and the support to innovate and bring their ideas to healthcare. Again, all the conversations I continue to have with people, and that's one of the reasons we do these hackathons, is because we feel that there really is a need to give these nurses an outlet to bring their ideas to the forefront and to develop them and to try to bring them out where they can have impact. A lot of places where nurses work today, I don't think there's a clear pathway for that. There's not a suggestion box even, or a place where you can go and say, hey, I saw this over here. Have we ever thought about doing it this way? Or what about this? And if systems were set up to properly listen and gather ideas like this, I can't imagine how many steps might be saved, how many lives might be saved, simply because we took the time to tap into nursing insights and intuition. And then the last one I would say, Jamie, that's so incredibly important is we need to ensure that we're bringing more diversity into the nursing workforce at all levels.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure that our nurses are mirroring the communities that they care for. So there's your long-winded answer. Sorry for that, but it was such a question. Like, oh, I've got so many ways I would answer the question.
You made a lot of good points. In the very beginning, you mentioned that without nurses, healthcare would fail. And, that's a powerful comment to make, and it's the truth. And I couldn't agree with you more. You mentioned how nurse educators, paying them appropriately. And, a lot of people are retiring. We're going to have to fill that hole. So getting them paid and, getting the right educators in, getting people in, I think is an important topic. And you also mentioned mental health support for nurses. The pandemic has been hard. And so mental health is a big one. You mentioned telemed and the diversity. You mentioned a lot of good points there. So thank you.
But there's so many ways to go. And, honestly, sometimes I just shake my head because it's not necessarily rocket science in terms of what we need to do. Some of it is just basically making nurses feel appreciated and part of the team and valued for what they bring to healthcare.
That's exactly right.
It's pretty simple in many cases. Not every case, but in many cases.
Yeah. So next question we have, what are some critical healthcare issues that nurses are facing?
Well, I think one, Jamie, that we've already talked about is the escalation with mental health challenges and burnout. Depending on the report you want to look at, you can see somewhere between 50 and 70% of nurses are reporting burnout. And that's obviously very concerning. And this is, as I mentioned, not just COVID related. Certainly it's accelerated during COVID, but this has been happening for decades. And, the concern there is if we continue to burn out our nurses as the backbone of our health system, we're not going to have enough nurses to care for patients. And that doesn't matter whether you're a COVID patient or, a new mom about to give birth or someone or someone who's an oncology patient. If we don't have enough nurses, our healthcare system is not going to work.
That's exactly right.
So that's
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, another one I think is just, and we touched on this a little bit, is the aging patient populations. You think about the boomers continuing to age, as everyone does, and needing more of care as they get into their older years, and making sure that we've got a nursing workforce that would be so important to providing that care. So that's a big one, to make sure that people are familiar in that geriatric space and comfortable providing care there.
Yeah. That's my love. Long-term care, geriatric medicine. It's my love for sure. And going back to mental health care, I have found in the nursing homes that some nurses and CNAs that I work with, they're embarrassed to talk about it. I'm like, don't be embarrassed. We're going through tough times right now. And they don't want to seek like a counselor or anyone to talk to because they're embarrassed. And that's one thing I think we need to emphasize is, some people are just so embarrassed, and we don't need to be embarrassed. I think everyone's burnout right now, and we need that help. We need that support.
Yeah, and to your point, there should not be stigma associated with mental health. I mean, there just shouldn't be. And on top of that, I know in various areas of medicine, nursing included, I think people are concerned about their license being, impacted if they were to report a mental health issue.
Right.
Which is horrible. So people continue to suffer in silence, and so there's some things I think on the policy level that need to be addressed.
Linda, do you think it is hard for nurses to have their own community?
Is it hard? I think it's sometimes because I think there's so many nurses that go in so many different places Is it hard to have their own community? I think it's just sometimes it's hard to reach them, to make them aware of a community. I think it's really important for nurses to have their own community because, like any profession, you need a safe place where you can go and vent or share ideas, and really kind of ideate together to kind of move things forward. So I think to have a community like that is super important. At the same time, I would also say one of the things within the nursing profession is that while we need to have that places for nurses to come together, we also need to do more to encourage nurses to step out beyond the walls of nursing. Because for people to really understand what nurses bring to healthcare, we have to make sure that nurses are showing up in places that are more unexpected, whether that's on boards or in community roles or what have you, just to make it more known in terms of the incredible skill sets that nurses bring to the party, and how, again, it's invaluable to healthcare, and get people to really think about what nurses do a little differently perhaps than they do today.
Yeah. So why is it so important for nurses to have spaces where they can connect with other nurses and nursing students? And what are some ways that that can assist with this?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a really important thing to have, to be able to come together in a safe place where you can share ideas, where you can share challenges, where you can vent a little if you need to, but really just feel like you're with your people, right? And people with shared ideas are going to, I think, come up with some great ways to improve whatever's going on. So I think it's important for people's mental health to be part of a group like that. And I think Nurse Tech has got a great opportunity to be able to continue to build this community, and also continue to make the broader population beyond nurses is also aware of what nurses are doing and their impact in healthcare.
That's right. It's a way of relating to other people because you've been there, you understand.
Right.
Yeah. So what does nurses-led innovation mean to you?
You know what? It's funny. I'll tell you a little story. When we, from 2002 to 2017, Johnson & Johnson Nursing, the work that I'm involved with today, I've been focused on bringing more nurses into the profession because of the nursing shortage at the time that was forecasted to hit by 2020 to the tune of about 500,000 nurses. And when I stepped into this role a few years ago, my manager at the time said, hey, take a fresh look and understand, are we still supporting nurses where it's most needed? So in that case, it was bringing more people into the profession. Or is there something else happening today where J&J could, again, lend our voice and our resources to better support the profession? So what happened, Jamie, is we started doing research to get kind of the lay of the land to see what was happening in healthcare, what was happening within the nursing profession as a whole, where the needs were. And what we really found was, as you well know, nurses are the most trusted profession for 19 years running. A very trusted, ethical profession that's respected in that regard. At the same time, what we found in our research is that people still don't understand what nurses bring to healthcare, and they weren't being valued for what they bring to healthcare. And then I started doing some desk side research to kind of see what was going on behind the scenes, checking in on some nurse blogs and et cetera, et cetera. And I was seeing some stories of nurse innovation cropping up, stories that I had never heard, that I had no idea of. And going way back to, Florence Nightingale with, the sanitary practices and all the way through the present. But what was amazing, Jamie, is that it was hard to find those stories. And the more I read and talked to people, I'm like, nurses are innovating every day.
That's right.
Whether they know it or not, they are. But it was really hard to find on the web. We actually had to hire an individual who could get into and really dive deep into the web to find some of these stories, because we wanted to raise those stories to the surface, because we think the topic of innovation in nurses is so critical to moving healthcare forward. So, long story short, back in 2018, that's where we started with our work, really focusing on innovation and doing more to support nurses who want to innovate through things like hackathons and our CML podcast and our J&J Nurses Innovate Quick Fire Challenges. But it's really about giving nurses a really clear path to bring those ideas that they have in their back pockets or tucked away in the back of their brains and bring them out to the forefront. Because I will put money on it, and I'm sure with yourself as well. You look at things every day and you kind of go, we only did it this way. Or I wonder if they thought about that, or why does that work that way?
That's right.
No, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for us to really move healthcare forward, we've got to really empower nurses and really help them to open up their innovative ideas. So that means, it could be something, as simple as making sure that there's a clear pathway, again, wherever a nurse may work, where those ideas can be shared, vetted, and supported to do some test and learns. But I really think that nurses, like no other profession, because of the time you spend in patient care, because of the insights that you gather, and that you see the bigger picture, that I think there's just an incredible opportunity to move healthcare forward by supporting nurses as innovative leaders and giving them the opportunity to do that.
There's a saying out there, I don't know who says it, but it goes, you create your tomorrow by what you dream today. So you mentioned innovation and encouraging nurses and their stories and their ideas. So I love and I respect how you mentioned that, because, innovation, we do it every day and we don't even realize it.
Every day. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you feel that mental health in nurses is being taken seriously, and what can Nurse Tech do to help bring more awareness through our community?
Great question. And, this is one of those tricky things right now, Jamie, too, because I feel like everywhere you look on the news today, there's so many stories out there about how the front line, including nurses, is under so much stress and pressure and, almost like PTSD, which is probably very valid. What concerns me about that is that if you think about where we were a year ago, people were banging pots and singing and lining the streets and just cheering on nurses and calling them heroes. So I think that that the mental health stress that's happening right now is very real, but I'm concerned that there's been so much pressure, so much importance put in myself, not the word I want. I feel the mental health issue is very real, but what's happening is there's been so much focus placed on that aspect of nursing that people have forgotten about all the other great things that nurses are doing day in and day out, raising the bar, showing up, and delivering really important and impactful patient care. So I think it's being taken seriously. I do think that there's some systems that are really starting to take some nice inroads here to develop specific programs to support nurses. J&J has done things with other partners to support nurses. So I think it's starting to really bubble up, which is great. And I think from a Nurse Tech perspective, it would be great to see you guys continue to, raise these stories, not only just to make people aware of what's happening, but also put a spotlight on some of the positive ways that nurses or health systems are taking action to support nurses and provide mental health support. So utilize your platform as a positive place to show where change is happening as a whole. And that'd be a great thing to do.
Thank you for that feedback. So what nursing technology are you interested in, and how do you see our healthcare systems evolving?
Great questions. Nursing tech in terms of, from my perspective, is anything that can ease the administrative burden that nurses are dealing with today, things that can simplify patient care, things that can improve access to care through the hands of a nurse working with a patient, and or supporting remote care. So I think there's tech can do so much, and I think especially tech in the hands of a nurse can be invaluable if you really want to, again, improve healthcare, improve access to care, and really, start taking clear steps toward value-based care as well. I think technology is going to play a clear role. There's no wrong answer.
Well, thank you, Linda, today. I really appreciate your time today on Nurse Tech and answering our questions. Really appreciate that. Anything last you want to mention? Right.
I want to thank you for the time, Jamie, and congrats to all of you at Nurse Tech for the work that you're doing and raising the voice of nurses. I think it's going to take all of us together, working together to do this. And so I so appreciate the opportunity to kind of come and talk with you guys today and be a part of all the work that you're doing. Thank you.